What's up guys, today I'll be showing you how to remove and refresh the intake manifold on an M156 AMG V8 from an ML63. The 156 manifolds are made of a magnesium alloy which corrodes very easily for whatever reason, and it's a pretty common problem with these cars. So as they age, there's just corrosion in the entire manifold which will need replacement at some point, but for the time being you can kind of fix it and make it look a little bit better and prevent further corrosion by removing it, by sanding it away, and also replacing some components such as the throttle body plate, which you see right here, new on the left and old on the right. The new is made of aluminum versus a magnesium of the old one. It's from this company in Florida. They custom build them. Pretty convenient, works for us in the US, but if you're out of the country, you can also replace them with other components or fix them yourself by TIG welding. Not the easiest thing in the world, but it's definitely doable.
First things first, of course, is remove all of your engine covers. First, the top cover in the front. You got to pull on the sides first. Don't crack this cover, it's pretty brittle. And of course, pull up in the middle, and the whole thing comes off like so. Next up, remove the tubing that goes to the air boxes on either side. Every car's a bit different. Plastic comes off like so. Might be a little bit tougher, I've already loosened these up beforehand, but this end clips onto the airbox, this clip to the front of the grille. Remove this clip on either side, unplug the MAF sensors. Loosen the clamp at the very top of the airbox over there, and then simply pull up from the bottom and pull it away. Then pull off this foam gasket on either side. And repeat the same thing on the opposite side. Next up is remove the black Y pipe at the back of the intake manifold over here. There are two clips that kind of hold it to the back of the manifold. We have to lift up on and pull them up. But first, there's a vacuum hose over here which we must remove. This hose can be pretty stubborn, so keep that in mind. Also, if your car's a bit older like mine, mine's 2009, built in 08, these vacuum lines start to crack and deteriorate, so I would have some silicone lines on hand to replace these as you go. Also, this little elbow over here, my previous one was actually totally destroyed, totally falling apart, so I replaced that about 6 months ago. Now I can simply reach down and pull up on the tab. I can feel it already. It's one side, other side. Go. And here she comes. Here's the Y tube over here, the two little ears that connect to the base of the manifold, and then here's the little elbow I was talking about that deteriorates over time. I'll put a part number below. Mine was, I want to say, 6 months ago, totally just falling apart, about to break in half, so I had to change that ASAP. It has a vacuum leak if you don't change that, so I would recommend doing that if your car is on the older side. Alright, now you can remove our fuel rail, which is not very hard at all. Just need to do a few things first. Let's disconnect this plug over here. Simply press and pull off. There is a 17mm hex nut for the main fuel feed line, but before we take that off, let's disconnect the vacuum line that goes just behind over here. This little vacuum pipe that kind of wriggles around. There should be actually a metal washer just like this over here. My car's missing it for whatever reason. But there's a vacuum line just back here. You want to disconnect that, and then we have more space to work with. And there's the vacuum line in question in the middle of the screen over there. It's kind of actually more of a vacuum T. I have a junction there, so be very careful if you remove it and try not to break it. Again, very brittle. Mine's actually original. I have not changed that one yet, so I might want to consider doing that in the near future. It's been disconnected now. You can kind of see there the light. There's the vacuum T over there. The pipe is off. Going to remove the main fuel feed line now at the very back of the manifold over there. Just crack that 17mm loose with a wrench, and now it's time to hopefully take it off. Anticipating some fuel, and actually we're not too bad. This car's been sitting here overnight, and I've been working on it for the past couple days, so I think there's been no fuel pressure in the system at all because I unplugged the battery a while ago as well. We can now loosen the 4 T30 Torx screws in the intake manifold for the fuel lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go get those out right now. With the 4 T30s out of the manifold, we can actually start pulling up on the fuel rail and getting access to the connectors. Now, you could remove the connectors before removing it, but I do find if you pull up on the fuel rail itself, you'll actually have more access to the actual connectors. It makes it easier to remove them, so I would do that instead. But yeah, we can start pulling up on it, and they should pop out slowly, but surely, kind of like that. Just like that, on the one side. There we go. Now the connectors you can see here, little tabs in the back, simply push back on them and we can let go of the connectors themselves. With all of your connectors unplugged and your zip ties undone, we can simply pull up on the fuel rail, Get it around that little vacuum line we unplugged earlier. Get the MAF wire out of the way. And here we go. Keep in mind there is still fuel in this rail, so if you dump this over, it's going to spill fuel everywhere. So maybe cap it off or just be mindful of it. I changed these injectors about a year ago. Can't remember how many miles, but it's been over 10,000, I think. They're still looking pretty good, but there is some oil at the bottom of these injectors, which means there may be some oil in the manifold, which is kind of what I was expecting. So we will have to see very soon. At the front of the manifold, disconnect all these connectors up here. We have this guy, which pulls off when you press those together. And these two throttle connectors over here, which you need to kind of press these together and they'll come off eventually. Also this guy down here, you want to remove that as well. Working at the front of the manifold, we have to disconnect a few electrical connectors. This guy, this one, and also this one. They're all keyed, so they kind of won't mess up. They will go in the right spot. Also, the length for these kind of determines where they go. There's also this vacuum line over here. Do not touch this guy. If this breaks, huge problems. They don't really sell this part individually, and you have to buy a whole new manifold. So, do yourself a favor, remove it from right over here. A lot easier. You don't have to worry about breaking that piece at all, and you'll be good to go. You can also remove just this check valve over here, and you'll be fine as well. At the very back of the manifold now, on the passenger side, to the right out of the car, I have to take off the PCV valve, which is right over there. There's one T30 torque screw kind of facing toward the manifold. We got to take that guy out and then kind of pull onto there. A couple O-rings holding it in place. So we'll need to do that. But first, there's this hose on top, which we can simply pull up on this side and it cuts out of the way. This will stay with the manifold as it comes out, so we can take a look at it later. There's actually the other end over here. You can kind of see. I'm not sure how well you can see it there, but trust me, there's another end in there. Going to try and get that T30 off now with the camera in my face. Oh boy. Ooh, that's tight. Oh man. This is going to be fun. Alright, I'll be back when we are somewhat making progress, but you get the idea of where that T30 is by placement of my ratchet over there. So, yeah, I'll see you soon. Screw eventually came out. It actually got easier as we made more progress, but now we can actually just pull back on the PCV valve. You guys can see that. And there it goes. Here's a better look at that PCV valve out of the manifold. You can kind of see that O-ring over there. It actually looks like there's been oil getting past the O-ring. You can kind of see there's a little bit of weepage over there. So back on the left side of the car where that fuel hose was over here, there's kind of a clamp you have to squeeze on, and when you squeeze it, this guy will come out. It's kind of this thicker hose that goes back over here, and it pulls right out of the manifold like so. And of course I find this as I take that hose off. Look at this, there's a nice little pool of oil back there. Look at that. Ugh. Also remove your connector for the intake temperature sensor. There's a little tab at the bottom of it. Press down on that and it comes out. You can leave the sensor actually in the intake manifold. It's not going to do any harm. So now we are ready to remove these screws for the manifold. Okay, now it's time to remove the T45 torque screws that go along the intake manifold. I see 5 on that side, 5 on that side. There should be 10 total. However, I have heard there may be 11. So you also should buy these new because they're aluminum bolts. So one-time use. You could use the old ones again, but I don't recommend it in risk of it cracking inside the head. So you really don't want to do that. So I bought new bolts. I have 11, but I can only see 10 so far. But I guess we'll find out where the 11th one is. So yeah, let's get started on that. I'm going to use this sort of ratchet with the extra length if I need it, and then a little extension, 3/8 inch drive all the way out, and a T45 out here. But yeah, like I said, I can only see 5 on each side so far, but I could be wrong. Let's see how it goes. Just got all 5 out of the driver's side of the car. Gonna move on to the next side. These are very light because I mean they're aluminum, so makes sense. Got all the screws out. It's time to get the actual manifold off the car. There is a hose at the back here we can kind of press down. It's a metal hose, and it kind of allows you to push the manifold backwards, like that. Okay, there we go. Now let's come up. Let's get the wires out of the way. Oh boy, this is gross. This is not a happy manifold. Alright, so there is that one hose back of the manifold over here, the lower half. It is connected by this those special clips. So you've probably seen it before. They're the one-time use. You need to prime off with a screwdriver with the flathead and kind of prime up. The clamp will get undone. You can pull them off. I'm going to replace the normal hose clamp because I hate these clamps and I don't have a special tool to take them apart. So I find that using a normal hose clamp afterwards should do the purpose just fine. So let's get to it. Here we go, bottom of the manifold, it's on its side right now, oil spilling everywhere of course. And there's the clamp I just undid with a little flathead screwdriver. And, oopsies, you can kind of see making its way out of there. Now we should be able to pull this guy off. Just pull that line right on out, because this dumb clamp over here, you need to replace that with this hose clamp, and then we can simply take the manifold on out of the car. Hopefully you kind of saw what just happened, but yeah, got that last hose out. Now you can take the manifold out completely, which is very oily, which is not fun. Now I've got the intake manifold less M156. There's the PCV valve back here. That's where it connects to the bottom over there. Lots of oil spill when I took the manifold out because it's just full of oil, which is exactly why I was doing this in the first place. We got to vacuum all this debris. I make sure that gets in these intake ports. Get this old gasket off of here. We don't need this here anymore. But aside from that, let's clean it up. Get a vacuum, big vacuum like that. Should work just fine. Also, this foam piece from the manifold does not need to be here anymore. We will clean this more later, but for now, just got all the intake ports plugged up with some shop towels so I think it's in there. And we can go like this later and clean up some more with some degreaser and whatnot. But for now, to the intake manifold. There are a bunch of T30 screws at the bottom of the manifold to separate the lower half from the top half. They're actually the exact same screws for the fuel injector rails, so pretty convenient. They're the same size. They're pretty stiff in there, but they'll come out eventually. I had to use some silicone spray to convince the intake manifold to separate, as it was pretty stuck together. But using some WD-40 or silicone spray like this would help, lubricate the surface, and the gasket will separate without a problem. You've got to push the grommet in for the throttle body cables through the lower half of the manifold so you can kind of clear, and then you get that wiring harness through. And then also there's a port at the back of the intake manifold on the lower half for the brake booster, so you're going to make sure that line clears. You can kind of see in the back there, it's a little bit white. But yeah, once that throttle body cable harness goes through and the breather port for the brake booster clears, you're in the clear to take the whole bottom half off. To remove the throttle body plate, we'll need to fold these two tabs at the back of the manifold back. You can see I'm doing that right there. They're just covering the T30 screws. But again, T30 screws exactly the same as the other ones we've seen before. The only T30 screw I've seen that's not the same so far is the one for the PCV valve. It's a bit longer, but the rest are exactly the same. Just gotta pry those tabs up and then remove all the T30 screws all the way around. With those screws out, you can actually pull the tabs out from behind the manifold we pried up earlier, and we can get those out of the way. Now I can pry off the throttle body plate retainer. It's sort of this massive magnesium plate over there. You can see it's just gotten loosened up. And we can kind of get it around the breather tube at the back for the brake booster and the throttle body wiring harness. There's now rubber gas that's kind of stuck here with the throttle body plate, so I had to use some silicone spray and also use a screwdriver to gently kind of press around the area to break the seal. And then the throttle body plate simply lifted right out of the manifold. Ooh, God. Alrighty guys, it's a new day. I want to show you guys the corrosion and the damage inside with some more detail. So on the lower half of the manifold, unfortunately there's quite a bit of corrosion over here. We got some over there and over there as well. And it just seems like some sanding, also some here as well I should mention. Some sanding and paint should take care of this for the most part. I can re-glue this part of the seal back down. Overall it's not looking too bad, it just kind of expected. So if your car is around my age, which is a 2009 model year, 08 build, and you have around 90,000 miles, I mean, I would start looking at this kind of stuff for sure, because you don't want this getting worse. There's no holes in this part, luckily, but if there were holes, we would be needing a new manifold most likely, or at least some extensive repairs. So I'm going to start sanding this eventually with the other parts as well, and repaint the entire thing, because some paint will protect it, and hopefully it'll last a little bit longer and prevent any further corrosion. So let's get to that soon, but first there's some other pieces that are damaged as well. Here we have that throttle body sort of retaining clip, or retaining piece rather, with all the T30 screws that go through it. Not looking too bad. I mean, there's some corrosion over here, but nothing that some sanding and paint will not take care of. As for the throttle body plate itself, you may be thinking, oh, that looks pretty clean. No, it's not too bad. I mean, some corrosion at the top, but not awful. And you flip it over, and it's a completely different story. It is just a total mess. There's actually a hole in the plate right over here, and it's probably going to be causing a pretty big vacuum leak over time, which is taking away from our performance from the engine, and it's not running optimally. Now, clearly not enough, or it's been slowly over time to not cause a check engine light, but trust me, this will be causing some performance deficits, and we don't want that. So that's why I bought the aluminum one, and also check out how dirty the throttle bodies are. Simple cleaning will take care of that. But yeah, I'm glad we got the new stuff. Here we have the top half of the manifold. It's actually pretty dirty. That gray stuff you see is actually magnesium dust from the corrosion over time, mixed with some oil from the PCV and just overall oil blow-by. I think if you drive your car harder, this actually burns off the oil inside the manifold, but this car is mainly city-driven. My dad drives it mainly. We take it on road trips, of course, too, but not driven as hard as, say, the C63 or SLS is. So we need to clean it out with some purple power or some other degreasers. Luckily, I'm not seeing too much corrosion inside of this area. If there was corrosion inside of here, I'd probably need to change the entire manifold, to be honest, but we look to be okay in there, just kind of dirty. There is, however, some corrosion along over here, very common area, kind of the back of the manifold where the Y tube connects. There's some corrosion over here. I'll show you guys in more detail with my phone camera, but overall, nothing we can't fix. It'll just take some time and some effort, and we should be all set from there. At the front of the manifold over here, you can actually see there used to be a wiring harness touching this when it was all connected, and it's actually eaten through. It kind of become a weak spot for the manifold over there, so you need to fill it up with some JB Weld quick weld I'm going to use, sand it down and paint it. I actually need to paint this entire thing. I'm just going to tape off these ports over here where the gaskets meet up, and then we can paint everything else and set it all down and make sure it's all nice and good. We do have some oil inside of here, but I mean, it's nothing too much to talk about. This is all pretty normal, but we'll still clean it regardless. Over here, just a little bit of corrosion. Nothing too bad, like I said earlier. We can work with that. The actually bad spot of corrosion is over here. You can kind of see. I believe it is supposed to be this kind of weird shape, bowed out shape, but it's split over there, and then if you look kind of underneath there's a bit of a gap. Here you can see better what I was talking about. There's kind of a gap back there that's kind of opened up, which we need to fill up. And first we should sand it down, I think, the Dremel maybe, and then fill it up with some quick weld, paint over it. It should be a lot better. Overall, I mean, we do have these random lines, and this paint is just kind of filled the manifold over time, so we'll repaint the entire thing silver. And then I see these lines here and there. I'm not quite sure if this is corrosion or if it's just the paint failing, but regardless, we're going to sand it down anyways and check it out. But overall, the rest of it's not looking too bad. It's mainly this piece and the throttle body plate over there. I think I spoke too soon. Check out all this corrosion over here. This is not quite pretty, is it? Nope. But unfortunately, it is what it is. So thankfully, there's no need to paint this piece. We have the new piece all together so we can transfer the parts later on. But for now, I'm going to focus on cleaning up this, sanding it down along with this as well, which means some further disassembly. I need to take off the intake temperature sensor over here. Need to remove some of the actuators up front. But after that, we can start sanding away and painting and cleaning. I'm going to want to pull this intake air temp sensor out, just kind of pry on it. There are usually two clips over here, but those seem to be missing from mine. Who knows what happened to them, but there we go. This is out. Let's keep it in a safe place and put it away. Alrighty guys, for the prep of the manifold, I'm going to take off all these T30 torque screws up front to take all this stuff off for the actuators inside. Take a mental note of what the inside looks like. For example, they're open right now, so you want to keep them in that position when you reattach everything. These little metal washers, let's take them off carefully and reuse them later. Same applies to ones over here for this little vacuum line as well. All of these guys can come right off. Just be mindful of certain O-rings and all that good stuff, but I'll do it real quick to show you guys. But yeah, it looks like we got some corrosion over here as well, so we will have to do quite a lot of sanding just to make sure this all is worth it in the end and we have a better intake manifold. Was looking at some other photos and it actually does seem like this is actually fully collapsed from what it should be, so I'm gonna do my best to fill it up with epoxy and try and level it out and kind of sand down this corrosion, trying to get it away, grind it away with the Dremel. That is disappointing, but hopefully we can get this thing better. I got a lot of work to do, so better get started. I'm gonna mask off this guy. I want to keep this guy there, and I'm also gonna mask off this better, the engine plaque, and we'll get to sanding. Also mask off this, and the line up front, and yeah, I'm gonna mask all that off. I'm gonna start doing that stuff as well, and yeah. All I'm doing here is taking apart the front of the manifold. Not much to do here, just a bunch of T30 torque screws and a bunch of plastic pieces as well. Just be very careful because they can be pretty brittle. They are pretty old at this point, so just keep that in mind. But other than that, pretty smooth sailing. Gonna put a little silver mark here just to give me a little bit more confidence as to where this guy should line up. It is keyed, so there's kind of only a couple places it can go, but you want to make sure you're in the right one, so this should help me out with that. I'll be sure to tape over that piece so we don't paint over our mark. Now we can just sort of pry that guy out. We can take this entire assembly and just sort of put it aside for now.
Some of the bolts can be a little bit tight, so having a power tool does make the job a lot easier, so I do recommend having one of those alongside you.
So for the back of the manifold, I'm going to take this line off. I'm just going to pull it out of these little clips. First I'm going to take these little metal pieces off. I'm going to leave the brake booster fitting in. I don't want to risk breaking that. I'm also going to leave this fitting in over here with this little line attached to it, just because I don't want to mess with this little fitting, because as I said earlier, these fittings, the one in the back over here, goes along with the one in the front. If things break, you got to buy a new manifold, which is not what I want to do. Alrighty guys, I'll show you what I'm up to. So if we take a look at this manifold, you can see that over here there is sort of some corrosion. I'm sort of already kind of knocking out the Dremel. It's kind of worse over here. I haven't touched this one yet, but over here I've more or less corrected that and sanded all the corrosion down so we can paint over that. But what I'm going to do now is keep continuing doing this, but I'll show you guys along the way. It's going to be very time consuming, but it'll be worth it, I think. So I'll keep going with that, and yeah.
For this process, you can either use a Dremel grinding disc or a sanding disc. I kind of use both throughout this video, I think. But the grinding disc is pretty good for getting the initial corrosion off at least, but for smoothing out, the sanding disc may be a bit more helpful. I'm going to go through a few of these throughout this entire intake manifold. I think I only went through 2 grinding discs, but you go through a lot of sanding discs, so be sure to stock up on those before starting this project. Just a heads up, you really do need a Dremel for this job. You cannot really do this by hand, so be sure to invest in a Dremel if you don't already have one, but I'm sure most of you guys already do.
Here's how things are looking right now. We've got clean up the manifold right now, but I've currently sanded down all of the corroded spots, and kind of only washing it off right now. There's still some dirt you can see from over there. Just need to clean it off using some purple power and whatever this stuff is. But I'm going to fill this stuff up, this little gap up here, with some epoxy. But other than that, things are looking pretty good. Looks nasty right now, obviously, just with all the grinding marks and sanding marks, but it's gonna look like a new manifold once we know that. I've chosen the silver color to use, not the traditional sort of grayish, so kind of in between this base model color and the T31 color, which I kind of like. And then this thing's kind of same story. Just need to do some more cleaning. I'm actually gonna prime these 2 pieces very soon, and we should be back in business probably tonight or tomorrow morning. We'll see. Need to give stuff time to dry, of course, so, you know. Been spending quite some time cleaning this manifold out. I'm not gonna be perfect, obviously, because you can't get in every crevice, but been working on the little outlets over here, and also between the flaps. You can see there's some fluid in there. That's some engine degreaser I have in there right now. Taking the oil out. That should be good enough for what we need. It's gonna make a huge difference how the car feels and how the car responds. Yeah, after this I'm gonna fill up some of the creases over here, one down here, with some JB Quick Weld, steel reinforced epoxy over there. Then I could also use it over here where there was a massive gash from the corrosion. I think I'm just gonna clean it out and paint over it. Not really a crucial part, although I still may fill it up just for the sake of structural rigidity. Over here, not much needs to be done really in terms of you know, filling up these spots. I just need to get this water, but probably just gonna paint over this. I might do a little bit of work on this side. I want to say it was over there, and also there's some spots on the side, actual side piece over here. I want to kind of fill those guys up because these are kind of structural, I believe. So I'll fill those up and fill that little gash up at the bottom of the Y tube opening, and we should be all set to start primering and painting. As for primer, I've got this Rust-Oleum sort of 2000 degree paint over here. I might need to bake it, although I'm not entirely sure. I think it should be fine. Yes, it's bake at 250 degrees, 30 minutes, and then allow 30 minutes to cool. We'll see if it's actually necessary. I think we should be okay because it's going to be an intake manifold anyways. We just want some protection, not necessarily a whole quality paint job really. We do care about the top of the manifold though, so I'll be using 2 different types of silver. I think I have a brake caliper silver for the bottom parts and stuff like that. I'm going to paint this area, this whole thing. Not going to paint where the gaskets meet up, so I'll tape off this section, and I'm not gonna paint the inside of this at all. So, but I will paint the outside all brighter silver I was showing you guys earlier. So we will get to that soon. This is a pretty tedious process. Between the sanding down all the corrosion spots, like you can see over there, all the work I've done, and on this guy. But this piece is actually basically fine. Just light corrosion in some areas, so I've sanded that part down. I'm just going to paint over it now, or primer then paint. But
didn't show much of the painting process, but pretty standard stuff. A few coats of primer, a little bit, then a few coats of paint. I did more of a silvery kind of finish for the top part, and a more of a matte sort of satin silver for the bottom half. You can see I filled in all the gaps with the JB weld. Not the prettiest in the world, but much better than before, and plus it will actually seal now. Here you can see I haven't skipped the bottom of the manifold as well, but also I masked off the intake ports. Didn't want to interfere with the mating surface of the gasket, so it is pretty satisfying to pull back that tape as well. If you choose just to do a high temp primer without any paint, it'll do the exact same job, no big deal. Moving on to the throttle body plate, we got to transfer everything over from the old plate to the new plate. This is as simple as simply just taking out the T30 screws from throughout the throttle bodies. But first, there's some plastic kind of velocity stacks on top of the throttle bodies you need to remove. A few plastic tabs, just use caution, don't break the tabs off, obviously. And then once those are off, we can keep on moving. Next step is to remove the throttle bodies themselves with the 4 T30 screws, I want to say. In each throttle body, you can see that's pretty clear on the other new aluminum plate. There are 4 little holes there. But getting these out is a little bit tough just because they've been there for years, but once you get them loosened up, it's no real problem at all. And then after 4 years of loosening, you can remove the throttle body once the 4 screws are out. You can see it's pretty dirty on the other side. Also, there's a gasket you can change or reuse. These gaskets don't really go bad. They're not really essential to change out, but for now I'm just going to put on this plate over here, and I will clean it up in a moment. But now time to work on the second throttle body. Of course, it will take another 4 years to remove because of those long screws. Here comes the second throttle body out of the way. Be mindful of the vacuum piping and air tubes that run across. Also fairly dirty, to be expected. Now you've got to raise some clips up, undo some more screws, and we can get the wiring harness for the throttle bodies out of the throttle body plate. And take a look at that giant hole in the middle of the throttle body plate. You can see right through it. Use some good old CRC throttle body cleaner. You can see before and after, before on the left and after on the right. Nice and gross over there and nice and shiny on the right side. That's what you want. The new aluminum plate comes from a company in Florida. They do provide you with a new rubber seal as well, which is pretty convenient. Just has to wrap around the outside of the plate. So you can see what I'm doing right now, just making sure it's seated properly all the way along the edges. And before we actually transport all of our stuff from the old plate we already took off onto the new plate. A little side-by-side action, new versus old. Pretty nice looking new plate. And here I've done everything except tighten down the throttle bodies, or the second throttle body at the very least. The first one's already in there. The second I'm just going to tighten down in this little clip over here and torque all the bolts. No specific specification, just go to what feels tight. Obviously don't over tighten things. This is one of those things that as long as it's kind of in there snugly, that's all I really need. But yeah, once those are ready to go, the whole entire plate's ready to go back in the manifold. Don't forget those little velocity stacks on either of the throttle bodies and make sure those are seated correctly. It's very easy to get these incorrectly seated and not have them properly attached, so make sure those are very properly attached, that both clips snap into place. Just plugging the throttle bodies back in, and then also make sure the wiring is all tucked away. You can see the clips already back into place, but just plug it in now, and then they should be ready to go. And just would you take a look at that, look how nice that looks. We got the aluminum throttle body plate and those cleaned up throttle bodies. This thing's going to run so much better with this refreshed intake manifold. Just time to put it back in the manifold and put the manifold back in the car. Use some Vaseline or other lubricant before putting the throttle body plate back in the manifold, but here you can see it's back in place with the retaining ring already screwed in place as well. Before popping the bottom cover back on the manifold, also clean up the seal with some soapy water. That's all you need to really clean it up and make sure it's all freshened up to go back together without any leaks. If you're crazy like me, take the time to clean out every last bit with some Q-tips as well. You can also see I put the intake air temperature sensor back in place as well. Snapped right back in, cleaned the O-ring up. Then some Vaseline on the seal as well for the bottom cover. Better than it being dry, as there's now less chance it'll leak any air. Don't forget to bend those two metal tabs down where the throttle body plate meets up with the little retaining ring. And there we go, the bottom cover's back on the manifold. Had to slide that little wiring harness through the grommet and then screwed it down.
Was looking to install the catch can before, but unfortunately the fittings just aren't the quality I kind of wanted for a car like this. I'm not trying to put low quality parts in this car. I also don't want to spread that to you guys. So I'm going to try and assemble my own kit that's a little bit better, not quite Weistech priced, obviously, something that's more reasonable. I'll be using some fittings I found for the M156 and maybe some AM braided lines and some a proper Mishimoto catch can, something like that. So for now, we're not going to put the catch can on, but I do have a new PCV valve over here I bought. For reference, this is a January 2021 build. My previous one was in August 2016, so about 5 years. That's how long it lasted, and I would say 50,000 miles. So maybe a little bit more than that actually. So we're gonna put this guy on and then clean up the surface over here, the little valley, and then we're going to put the manifold back on the car. Here are my 10 new bolts of the manifold. I got the part number right over here. There are 10, not 11 like I kind of mentioned earlier. I'll put the link in the description below as well. Also got my 2 new intake manifold gaskets from L-Ring. These are like the OEM equivalent, but yeah, gonna get these cleaned up. I kind of cleaned up the valves real quick. And I'm going to clean up the valley a bit more, maybe with some brake clean, but yeah, check it out. They're looking pretty good in there. So just going to put it on the vacuum through here, and then I'm going to put the manifold back on. I'm not too concerned about, you know, if it looks pristine or not. I mean, it's not going to be seen, but loose debris is good enough for me. Got the new manifold gaskets on with the kind of bumpy side up. You really can't put them on incorrectly because they won't go on the other way around. So, for example, with these little dowels, they really won't line up incorrectly. So those are the same part for both sides, which is kind of nice. But yeah, we're ready to get the manifold on now. What's going to be annoying, I might try and zip tie these cables out of the way just because they are pretty much right in the way, these ones and these ones. So hopefully we can manage those fuel injector wires, but yeah, it's going to go in very soon. And here the torque specs for the intake manifold looks like 10 newton meters first, then stage 2 is 90 degrees, and then stage 3 is 10 degrees again. Be very careful because these bolts can snap quite easily, especially if you're reusing your old bolts, which I don't recommend, which is why you should buy new bolts. Also, I did notice that when I was doing this myself that the bolts did kind of want to snap. They weren't really getting to quite the spec they should be at, so I didn't tighten them to this exact specification, so just kind of keep that in mind. It's more of a recommendation that it is a be-all end-all, so do keep that in mind, just be careful. Of course, my camera died as my intake manifold went back on the engine, but it was pretty straightforward. Don't forget the foam insulating pads that we took out earlier, and then of course that bottom hose as well. I put all the accessories back on as well. You can see the intake filters and whatnot, but pretty straightforward, kind of doing exactly the same as we did before, just in reverse. Time to prime the fuel system and get this thing started. Going to cycle the ignition on and off just to get some fresh fuel in the lines. It'll probably take a second to start. Let's see. Got a misfire. Just turn it off. My misfire was actually pretty harmless. It was just an injector that wasn't fully plugged in. The electrical connector, of course, I think for cylinder 5. That was all it was. Once I plugged it back in, it was totally fine. Ran just like a dream. So if you guys are curious why that was happening, that's the only reason why. Don't be worried if your first start's a bit rough just because of a lack of fuel in the lines, but it'll all be okay. I actually drove this car the day after I finished this project on a 400-mile trip up north, and I got a speeding ticket, but the car drove really well, and you could definitely feel there was a definite improvement in responsiveness. Then over a 2,000-mile period, I actually noticed there was a little bit less oil consumption. Now this could be a combination of the PCV valve being changed out, and also, the intake manifold refresh. So with all that being said, hopefully this video helps you out maintain your M156. I know it's been a while since I uploaded a video for this platform. I've just been really busy with school, but I'm glad to have one video back on the channel. I've got a lot of ML content coming up in the future, along with BMW stuff, 5 Series stuff specifically, and 3 Series turbos. So stay tuned for that, and subscribe for more content like this, and leave a like on this video if you guys liked it. And I appreciate all you guys watching these videos and sticking with me, even though I'm not really uploading as much as I used to. So thanks again, guys, and see you in the next one.